extinctors.
My name is Mona Chalabi and I'm a data journalist. My job is to find numbers in all sorts of different places and then turn them into images that people will understand and connect to. I always try to think of ways to connect the subject matter with the visualization itself, so that people can automatically see what the data visualization is all about. If it's about niqabis being fined in France, I'll draw a niqabi. And if it's about the KKK, I will draw a KKK hood. If it's about sleep, I'll draw a sleepy face. If it's about the Greek economy taking a dive, then I'm going to draw a diver. I hope that by creating hand-drawn illustrations, it doesn't alienate people, it doesn't make people feel like I'm not smart enough to understand this, which is a big problem with, I would say, traditional data journalism. So when I create an illustration, I don't just assume that because I understand it, other people will understand it. I share that illustration with people who don't work in my field whatsoever. I'll call you tomorrow about the email. I share it with my mum sometimes and ask them whether or not they get it, and that really, really informs how I work. And very often their response is, this doesn't make sense to me. And then I have to go back to square one. I think one of the things that has informed my work is that growing up I didn't read journalism because the language and the way that it was written felt so inaccessible. And I think that's one of the things that interests me about numbers and the idea of drawing, is that it's a language which is more accessible to a broader range of people. I think journalism is incredibly elitist, and I think part of the success of far-right news outlets is speaking a different language, even if it's a language of misinformation and even if it's a language that is not grounded in fact. It is a language which is not patronising, which speaks to people in their own language, and that's incredibly effective. I've been creating illustrations. I don't even know if I can call it art. I've been doing this now for 5 years, almost 5 years. And I kind of know how to do the hand-drawn stuff now, and I know how to scan stuff, and I know how to colour it. I have no idea how to paint. And so I thought I would give it a try. It's just quite a big first try. This study came out earlier on this year about representation in the art world, and it kind of quantified the lack of diversity in a really, really spectacular way. So they looked at the museum collections of 18 major US museums, and they found that 75% of all of the art in those museum collections was made by white men. And so in the foreground of this painting, there are 100 figures, and 75 of them are white men. So in the background, there are 189 additional figures. And they're the women and people of colour that need to be added to the art scene for it to actually represent the population as a whole. The title of the work is called Who Are You Here to See? And yeah, that feels really relevant too. I worry that without evidence and data, sometimes there's too much of an emphasis on the individual, right? So one person saying one thing and then one person saying something else. And I think one of the powerful things about data is that it allows you to focus on the issue rather than the individual. And that can potentially be quite empowering. In addition to this painting, which uses US data, I really wanted to do something about UK art spaces. So there are 3,416 artists in the Tate's permanent collection as of the last time that they published their data. And of those 3,416, just 521 are women. And so my first stage after analysing all of that was to create this, which is a kind of simple chart. And on the horizontal axis is the year that the artist was born. And then the y-axis is the percentage of all of those artists that were men or women. And what you see over time is that there is some progress. So if we had equality, right, there would just be a horizontal line through this, and you would just see 50% men and 50% women for any given year. And And the idea of doing a drip painting is it shows that the men are kind of encroaching on women's space or like women's territory. Yeah, so I'm going to try and do a drip painting. I get my ideas from all kinds of different places. They kind of fall into two broad categories, really. One is responding to things that are happening in the news, so being part of an existing conversation that's already happening. My lived experience can often affect which stories from the news I perceive as being worth taking on. So I've been to Palestine, I've been to Israel, and I felt like what I saw there wasn't necessarily well reflected in the news coverage that I was reading. And I feel like it's a topic that could potentially lend itself well to good data journalism. And so that's something that I might take on that is, again, informed by my own personal experiences. I don't think I should have it in inches. I think I should have done it in centimetres. The other one is kind of starting a new conversation. So I ask people to send me ideas that they have about things that really, really matter to them. So I'm often checking my DMs, my email, and just looking at the things that people care about. And very often it comes from their own personal experiences, right? So it'll be like a school teacher from one part of America where the public school system is being defunded that I'm not aware of. And those are questions that might not necessarily come to me because they're not a part of my lived experience, but I think that they're really important questions. I moved to New York 5 years ago, and I'm still just another brown Muslim woman in that country in terms of my paperwork. And it was just a really, really scary time. And I still think it's a really, really scary time there. There is a great extent of Islamophobia in America right now. And one of the narratives about that is that Muslims pose a security threat to the country. The statistics, the data suggests differently. The data suggests that actually white terrorism is the biggest threat to America at the moment, that gun laws are a huge threat to American public safety. And so I often think about the areas of misinformation that people have, and some of my work attempts to directly address that. I think it's often the most vulnerable groups in society that are affected by fake news, whether it's, Muslims in America, refugees who are being portrayed as like benefit cheats and wanting to come here just to steal money. Yeah, that really, really frightens me. That really, really frightens me. Hi, Kim! How are you? Good to see you. So let's see, the oldest are these. It's just a lot. No. You wish, no way. Basically, the power of all of these is that because this was when I first started working, I was just illustrating them and photographing them and posting them as is. But my later work, this was for Thanksgiving, and it was about the number of babies that are born relative to the number of turkeys. But as an illustration, on the wall, it doesn't really make sense as a chart. Yeah. And so I think that's one of the evolutions that people see of charts that make sense and then charts that eventually don't. Do you know what I mean? I want to figure out the spacing of it a little bit.
Yeah, we should plan them.
Yeah.
And then start tacking them up.
Okay. Part of the purpose of creating hand-drawn illustrations is that I want people to look at it and question the illustration that they see in front of them, because the truth is that there is a high degree of imprecision in data, right? There is something to be said for an understanding that for every statistic that you see, the truth lies somewhere within the parameters around that number. Do you know what's funny? I think even this one right here, which did really, really well, this is one of the more successful ones. I think this one, I got the numbers slightly wrong. So it's photoshopped in the final version to crop off the bars a little bit. So I don't know if that affects the value of it, that it's actually just wrong.
Knows your process and that you're double checking numbers all the time.
Yeah. And honestly, getting it wrong all the time. I feel like it's important to be transparent about that.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think so, all of those. Oh my God, there's so much to do. One of the best things about doing the data journalism that I do is that I will publish a chart on deaths from AIDS, and I will show George Bush kind of presiding over this period, and in all of the comments will be people that will be talking about other factors that contributed to the rise of AIDS beyond the government's kind of turning a blind eye to it. And so readers are constantly holding me accountable and saying, these are the things that you're getting right and these are the things that you're getting wrong. And the smaller your readership, the fewer people are able to hold you to account. I want to reach a really big group of people, partly because I want to get it right. And I don't know if you necessarily get it right when you're in an echo chamber and speaking to an in crowd. I think I push back a little bit at the idea that fake news is something new. There's always been misinformation. There's always been deliberate misinformation. I think the word fake news implies intention. And I think there are a lot of journalists who are trying to do a good job, who are contributing to that. Look at the coverage of the US election. The response was, we didn't get it wrong. The public misunderstood our articles. And I think that part of the reason why there is so much misunderstanding about that is because journalists aren't saying to you, there's an 80% chance this person will win. They are saying to you, there's an 84.9% chance. And that is complete misinformation. They are selling you a lie about the precision of their work. We don't know the weather to that degree of accuracy. We don't know election outcomes to that degree of accuracy. So if the public didn't understand, you failed, and you need to hold up your hands and say, we got it wrong. And there was just an unwillingness to do that was really frightening to me. When I was hired by The Guardian, we had a conversation, are we going to cover the US election by making a prediction? And I felt very, very, very strongly that the role of data journalism is not to forecast people's behaviour, it's to understand the now, it's to use the past and the present to be able to inform people so that they can make informed decisions themselves about how they want to vote. It's not to tell them, this is what you will do before you do it. Instead, we spent the entire election writing a column called Skeptical Polling, where we would talk about why polling had its limitations and why it was so often incorrect. And I'm proud of the fact that we did that. I think people can often conflate polling with data journalism, and it's actually come to be such an integral part of data journalism, which worries me. It worries me even when it's not about forecasting people's behaviours, because I think polling is fundamentally flawed. I think using 1,000 people to represent a population of 320 million people isn't a good idea. It's just fundamentally imprecise. I think even if you're not necessarily even that interested in the news, data affects every part of your life, right? If you don't have access to good data, how are you able to go to your employer and say, this is what I should be paid? And so informing people how they can go out and collect the numbers themselves that are relevant to their lives so that they can be their own advocates is really, really important. And I think that that perspective was massively informed by my background working in an NGO where other people were campaigning for what Iraqi refugees and IDPs needed. And actually, those Iraqi refugees and internally displaced people should have been in the room to speak for themselves rather than us speaking on their behalf. I was studying international security. The goal was to go into NGO work or working for the United Nations. I worked for the International Organization for Migration's Iraq office, and I was looking at statistics about what people in the country needed.
But Najif, when I went last time with you, was not the place that I left at all. It was completely different. It's not always safe there. then, but
Even now?
they say it's a little bit better. It's not much different.
I remember we took one car journey where we got into the car from where we were staying, and then we went to go and have some kind of meeting or something. And then by the time that we drove back, we drove past the same building, and the building had been completely bombed.
Oh,
Do you remember that?
yeah,
And it
yeah.
had been bombed 10 minutes after we passed it.
Yeah.
It's so weird to hear all of the headlines about all of the migrants that are crossing by the water, and then you told me that one of our cousins swam.
Yes, he nearly lost his life, I think. It was horrific what he went through.
Is this one okay to show? You're not wearing a hijab in that. So I went to Iraq, and I think I took the photographs on my first ever visit to the country. I'd never been before. And it was my mum's first time of returning to the country since she left in her 20s. And so it was just very, very bizarre to see this place that was always an imagined place. It was imagined. It was just kind of present in our household, but not present in our household. And yeah, I guess taking photographs was a really important way of making it feel real, because it was quite surreal to be there. And then what I did was I digitally altered the photographs to show statistics about the country.
Look at
So one of the issues with traditional data journalism charts is that you don't see any humanity in it. You don't see any people. It just feels so cold. And so one of the data visualizations that I did based on Iraq was showing how life expectancy has changed over time. I literally took a photograph of my mum standing in the garden of the house that she grew up in and digitally altered it. So I adjusted her height as life expectancy in Iraq has changed. Because I didn't want someone to see a bar that's bigger and then see a bar that's smaller and think, okay, so Iraqis live a few years less. I wanted them to see a woman and know that a shorter life expectancy means fewer years of her living with her family. It means fewer years of her being able to support her family. It's a real person. And I still think that using photography in data journalism could be a really powerful way to do it. I really, really enjoyed that process. Looking back at the photographs now, I think they're really terrible, but it was my first step in creating this kind of a thing.
Yeah.
That is a great tiger. I would be proud of that tiger today.
This one?
Yeah. I'm going to take a photo. That's how all tigers should be drawn. That's some inspiration. Bing bong. 63 Javan rhinos. 60 Ama leopards. 43 Christmas Island geckos. 40 Burmese roof turtles. 30 vaquitas. 29 Guam kingfishers. Next stop, extinction. Once you're ready to start, if you can type in this URL. So this is a really, really simple spreadsheet in some ways and less simple in other ways. It's about the Titanic. It's like from a passenger list of everyone that was on the Titanic. And very often when I'm opening spreadsheets, like especially ones that are created by large institutions, the columns at the top seem to make no sense. They've just got like a weird series of like letters and numbers. And that's because somewhere else on the internet is a code book that you have to use to kind of decipher some of these things. So it's really important that if you feel confused, try to find a code book that can help you to decipher what those numbers mean. Don't necessarily just give up.
How would you define the difference visually between a third and a second?
So I think a lot of people feel healthy skepticism when it comes to numbers, but they don't necessarily feel empowered to understand how to take apart that number. They just think, okay, I either have to trust it or not trust it, and there's no kind of middle path. And I think that's a really, really bad way to work. So I not only want people to understand how I reach my conclusions, I also want them to feel empowered to repeat those steps for other pieces of information. So if I've shown them how I can fact check a claim that a politician has made, then they, when they hear another claim, are able to repeat those steps and check it out for themselves. And honestly, like one of the things that's so exciting about data is that you are able to be really transparent in ways that you might not be for other types of journalism. So in investigative journalism, sometimes you just can't reveal your sources. I obviously always reveal the sources of my data. So now straight away, we're starting to see a story, right? The probability of surviving is much higher in first class compared to third class, compared to crew. By just getting rid of age for now.
Yeah, we just added it just to see.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, great. No, do what you're doing. It's good to experiment. Do you know what I mean about the labels on this though? It's like kind of confusing to me. It says class and crew there. No, it's confusing. It says class at the bottom. Anyway, but it's quite easy to like go in and change those things. I like that. I think it's really cool. I thought I'd just talk you through a few different like charting techniques. This is small multiples. I love small multiples, and I feel like it's something that you guys can think about. So this was something about cases of measles. And again, look, each one of these babies is a year. I could have just as easily had a pie chart, but I thought I want to show a baby it's just more fun, a baby that's covered in spots, but also allows you to kind of like, I don't know, it's just this idea again of marrying the subject with the thing. It's interesting to me as well how when people are younger, I think they have quite a good relationship with maths because they are able to understand how they reach the final number, right? Part of the way that people suddenly become disenchanted with maths is that it doesn't make sense anymore, right? You're not able to follow those steps. And with good data journalism, it's literally a case of saying, this is the number of crimes that were committed, this is the population, and this is how I calculated the rate. And people can repeat those steps for themselves and see exactly how you reach that conclusion. And that's really empowering. It shows readers that you're on the same level playing field. If I can do it, you can do it too, which is a really great message to have in journalism. You're fine.
But then like the third classes, even if
Hi, I'm Mona. Nice to meet you. Hi, Fraser. I inherently feel skeptical about most of the data sets that I see because in every single case I am not in that data set. Arabs are not on any data sets by and large that are collected in America, so I have always perceived myself as the other and I don't see myself in these data sets. And even in this painting that I spent 4 months creating, Arabs are the other. And I think that informs your whole outlook on the world when you aren't in that data set, and it makes me fundamentally skeptical and it makes me fundamentally concerned about collecting more accurate and better information about the world around us.
I just want to say thank you for coming. Thank you for celebrating Mona with us. Mona, thank you for working and collaborating with us. It's been a joy. I really feel like our relationship has bloomed platonically for now, but thank you.
I didn't really ever describe myself as an artist, and Kim really insisted on me doing that. And it was only in the process of putting up all of these illustrations that I saw how big this body of work is, and this isn't even all of them, that I feel a bit more comfortable using that word, which is also part of this main piece over here, which is who gets to kind of call themselves an artist in established art spaces. Yeah, I first started drawing because I was in a really miserable job that I hated, where I felt like I wasn't really respected, and I literally just started drawing at my desk to kind of stay sane. And it did bring me some sanity, and it's brought me a lot of joy too.
When you're struggling to find what the truth is, it's really helpful to have something like Mona's work, which is just based in like spreadsheets and data to tell you literally what is going on, and there really isn't that much of that around. So I think she's really serving a community or a group of communities that generally get left out of data journalism.
So I love the fact that Mona just deals in something that's just factual. You know, in a world which is bizarrely devaluing truth. And the fact that it's beginning to become the norm, which is, terrifying. And that Trump, right now as we're speaking, it feels like Trump is winning. And so for people to come along and just say, look, here's the facts, here's the truth. And this isn't spun, it is what it is. It's just so important.
Data very often replicates the systems of power that already exist. Maybe they ignore bisexual people, maybe they ignore tiny religious and ethnic minorities. And I think a big part of the future of data journalism, a big part of the future of fact-checking is journalists going out and creating their own data sets. And that's incredibly difficult to do. It's incredibly expensive right now, but that again might be changing. But I think it offers us some really exciting opportunities to break apart from those systems of power and to collect data in a way that better represents different communities.